Accountability Board's meeting for this week. We are going to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. And first item on our agenda is approving our last week's meeting minutes. So I'm going to ask the executive director to please draw those up. And then if we're all comfortable, I will be waiting for a motion to approve the minutes, please, in a second.
Move approval.
I second.
Okay, all in favor of approving meeting minutes, please? Okay, all right. All set, meeting minutes are approved. Dr. McIntosh. Oh, that's you're just saying, you're just voting. Got it, okay.
Okay, everyone. So we have a great deal to talk about tonight. I want to start with the RASE Commission's report, which formally came out in the last 24 hours. And I also want to talk about where that city reform plan, that Executive Order 203 reform plan is at. So I'm just going to share my screen, give a brief presentation on that, and then we're going to move to discussing briefly the RPD's new policies and procedures that have been being rolled out starting last week. And then we're also going to discuss some staffing and hiring updates. But before we get to that, we'll also be talking briefly about budget, which is a very important pressing matter we got to talk about. Okay, so to our updates. Okay, give me just 1 second here. So just a reminder, last year in the wake of the death of George Floyd, there was a lot of different reform groups created. In Monroe County, there were two. There was the RACE Commission, the Racial and Structural Equity Commission, led by former Mayor Bill Johnson, and the Executive Order 203 Working Group on Police Reform, led by Mayor Warren. Both of those groups released their final reform plans. So what are these plans? They're over 1,000 pages of documents, recommendations, research materials, etc. I can't possibly hope to summarize those tonight. What's important to know is that thousands of work hours went into these things, particularly with the RACE Commission. There were dozens and dozens and dozens of people working on a whole bunch of working groups for months. And you all know, I think the community knows how much effort the Police Accountability Board put into the reform plan for the city. And these reform plans and commissions cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money. So what do we get for these things? Well, let's talk about the city policing reform plan. This week, the city itself released a final plan that had some minor revisions from the draft plan. There were some new recommendations about body-worn cameras, little things, but nothing that I would present on tonight. Nothing fundamentally changed in the plan. But just a reminder that all of our recommendations were either removed from the plan or stripped of their substance. And that the final plan has no support or funding for PAB, and that there is no implementation plan in the plan itself, but there's a call for an implementation committee to be led by the chief of police. That is how the plan will be implemented, is through another commission. And just, the RACE Commission, that group had many recommendations. Outside of one data sharing proposal, there was no mention of the PAB in their proposals. And again, instead of having implementation deadlines, the RACE Commission is calling for an implementing commission. Okay, and I want to say that there are so many recommendations in the RACE Commission's report. I can't go through all of them tonight. But again, these are the top line things people need to know about these proposals. On the reform plan, on the city's reform plan, council is finishing its second public input session tonight. So this week, now that the final plan is with city council to vote on and approve, city council is having its own public feedback sessions. One is going on right now, and one happened on Tuesday. Tuesday's session focused almost solely on people calling to fully fund the PAB. That was the overwhelming thing people asked for. And that is what they've been writing in, saying it's fully fund the PAB, support the PAB's proposals. On Monday, this coming Monday, council members will submit and vote on proposed revisions. So they are thinking about revising the proposal, but they will be submitting those proposals on the same day that they vote on them. So there won't be much time to deliberate or discuss, right? And there's no chance for the community to kind of speak about what council's revising. And then the revised plan will be voted on Thursday. So by the time that we meet next week, city council will have either approved or rejected the city's plan. So, there's no time for us. There's no back and forth or anything like that. City council, and again, because the deadline's April 1st. So that's kind of the brief summary on the reform plans. Again, just to summarize, these two commissions, the end result are, proposals for action with no implementation, and both commissions are proposing additional commissions. So that's the summary on that. I can answer any questions. We can talk about those things, how we want to approach it, etc.
So if there's another commission, I'm assuming that's going to require now more time and effort, but no implementation and no change until those commissions are commissioned. Is that right?
That's right. And as I understand it, the city's new public safety, it will be a commission dedicated to reimagining public safety in Rochester. It will be led by the police chief, and the police chief will decide who gets to be on that commission. That's the last thing we heard from the city.
So I
The
guess
fox starting the hen house.
yeah, well, it's also too what we're supposed to be doing, folks. I don't, you can have a commission on a commission on a commission, but the fact of the matter is that that is what we're supposed to do. And I don't know how that can be any clearer. I guess I'm just disappointed.
So does anyone think we should write a letter to the council, giving them our recommendation on whether or not they should pass the report? I mean, I guess from my understanding, I certainly would feel like we should ask them not to do it unless there are actual commitments and deadlines. And, the PAB is appropriately involved in whatever is coming next.
It seems to me that of course the fix is on, so nothing is going to substantially change. Nothing's going to change. On the other hand, I think we owe it to ourselves to have a marker down that says that we're disappointed that our suggestions were not included.
I agree.
Otherwise, we sort of imply that we accept what has been done, and we're not accepting what's been done. We're not happy with what's been done.
And I guess I just
Edith's smiling.
thinking about this, this definition of insanity comes to mind of, continuing to do the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And I'm not really understanding this whole commission thing, the recommendation for it. And another thing is this supposed to cost the community anything?
Right.
The community's already $1 million in the hole from what was spent for the RACE committee and for WilmerHale. So is this going, and my understanding is that our budget is being cut, but yet there's a recommendation for a new commission. So I guess I would be seeking more clarification on that.
A new commission that's going to do practically what we should be doing. How does that work? So it's not about not having the funds, it's about allocating the funds to which they want to give the funds to? I'm confused.
Reallocate
Well,
back to yourself.
everybody's going to want to bite at this apple. I mean, the front page of today's paper has another group that is a part of the movement for police reform. I forget the name of him. Some guy named Morris.
Can you say more, Bob? I don't know.
It's some national organization. They had a press conference apparently on Tuesday. It seems to me I remember that the guy's last name was Morris. They're asking for a federal overseer to monitor the police department, amongst other things.
Locally? Was this yesterday's press conference?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
I thought it was Tuesday. Okay.
Yeah, it was yesterday.
But anyway, that's a whole, not a whole different, but another kind of approach, asking for federal oversight and supervision.
At the end of the day, I really feel like this is just, more of the same. The constant runaround, the constant, lack of transparency, just trying to keep things the same. This is just strategic to keep the PAB kind of out of the loop, or not doing the work that we're. To me, that's the bottom line. I mean, even the fact that the RACE Commission just got their paperwork in now, which gives us really with the deadline being the first, that gives you no opportunity to weigh in, to give a second look on these documents and just to weigh in. Everything seems to be a strategic process to kind of keep the PAB out of the loop. That's how I see things right now.
Our board member Brown, sorry.
Great evening, everyone. I too agree that we should send a letter to council stating the difference between what they're proposing, what we proposed, and why we think some of their recommendations are not as advantageous as they would like the public to think. Number one, because there's no deadlines, there's no structure, and so it's just a flag blowing in the wind. But if we give them point, reason, example, point, we are on record, not agreeing, why, and have stated what we propose to be better.
So to that point, I was wondering if anyone would like to take the lead on helping to draft the letter. Can I get some discussion around that, please? Board members?
When's the deadline?
It's a good question of when the deadline is, because go back, just to bring back the time frame. On Monday, City Council will be voting to revise the thing. So they could revise, so you could think we want to get a statement out before they revise it. Or you could think we want to wait till we see the revision to see if they reincorporated our things. So that's kind of a question for you folks. Do you want it to be, we'd have to essentially get a letter out tomorrow, essentially on a Friday evening probably. Or do we want to wait till the Monday thing's over and then get a letter out before they vote on Thursday?
Right, but they're going to probably do their last revision Monday.
Right. So Monday, by the end of Monday, we should know what's in the plan and what's not.
Actually, I would propose to do a draft of a letter that addresses what's in front of us now, and not worry about any revisions that they might make.
Okay, thank you. Reverend Nikoloff.
Given kind of this, that a lot of people who went to the city council meeting asking for us to be funded, to be considered, and we don't know if that was heard or not. given that this is relentlessly insulting to the work that not only we're putting in, but the people's voting for this to be the venue by which this happens, I wonder if writing another letter is just setting ourselves up for disappointment, or if that the letter should also be published, and it should be more than just a letter saying, hey, we'd like you to consider, and more like, dear city council and people of Rochester, here's what is happening. Here it is in 3 or 4 really clear points so that every single citizen can know what's happening to their mandate for this PAB to be established to do this work. We are doing everything that we are called to do. I know that some will say that city council is supporting us in some ways, but this needs to be, you want the people's vote, you should do what the people ask for. And I think we need to let the people know. And I think we should include them in this conversation, because I don't have faith that another letter will be received with any kind of seriousness, but I do think even if they decide to go with the document as stands, and the people will know what they're losing out on. And I know that people are watching these meetings. I know we can broadcast them, but we all know that, like, trying to reach people, you got to say things 7 or 8 different ways so that you can reach 7 or 8 different kinds of ways of people hearing. And I would like to see us be a little more public with this.
Thank you, Reverend Board Member Brown. And I just also wanted to keep on. I know we can circle back to this unless people want to take a vote on a letter. We want to stay on task, or not on task. I know that sounds rude, but I know that we still got a lot to talk about. So Board Member
Right.
Brown and then Rabbi Settle.
Yes. Not beating a dead horse, the proposal of writing the framework for the letter has already been written. Kind of did that when we first discussed what they were leaving out. So that's done. All we need is an opening and a closing to that statement. So we don't have to have a group to put it together, and it's already done. All we have to do is put a headline on it, sign it, and send it over. But with that, I'm not going to.
Rabbi Settle.
Yeah, and I guess when I said write a letter, I meant make a public statement. I mean, I think that in that sense, it's not just about a private letter, right? But it's saying publicly, here's what didn't happen in the process, here's what needs to happen. And also, I agree with Dr. McIntosh. I'm just appalled at sort of this boondoggle with public money. I still don't really know what Wilmer Hale did for $250,000. And, and I assume somehow in all this commission stuff, there's going to be more of that, not less. And again, more commissions on commissions. So I think that we should also be clear about that, there's an agency already set up that the taxpayers overwhelmingly endorsed, right? These commissions are not open tables. They're not, elected. And that if there is additional money to be spent, it should be spent so we can do our job.
Unless I'm misunderstanding, public statements without something in writing, a specific document, it doesn't go anywhere. We can make as many statements as we want, but if you don't have something in writing, it's just blowing in the wind.
I'd like to say that my suggestion wasn't that I thought that a letter would have an effect. I simply wanted to leave a paper trail.
I agree. That's what I'm thinking too. Board Member Tucker.
That's what I was going to get clarification on. Are we doing a public statement, but also including a letter just to, create paper trail? Because if that's what we were going to vote on, I would agree with that. Like, yes, notify the public, like Reverend Nikolov stated, definitely notify the public of what's going on. But also we do need that letter to kind of say like, okay, we formally sent you guys a letter and this is the paper trail for it. So I just was going to get clarification on what you guys have stated.
So can I just kind of gather up all the statements into one thing to put forward for vote if necessary, and just say, to Dr. Harrison's suggestion, we would like to submit or work on an open letter to City Council. Also, we can send it out to the public about our concerns about the executive order and how we would like to see what changes that we would recommend, and about our concern of the process, and with what we have now, not looking for what we hope to happen. So working, and I know that's a big thing to say, but I just if anybody wants to take a vote on all of that, because that's a lot, but I know we can work on that through email as well about what that will actually look like. So,
Oh, go ahead. Okay, I'll second that.
right, so all in favor? Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Chair, I have a quick clarifying question just on timeline. And
Yes.
maybe this is something to discuss over email, but are we trying to get the letter out before the Monday revision session or before the Thursday vote?
Can I say something, Connor?
Please.
I would say we would need to get the letter out before the Monday revisions session. I don't think we need to wait till Thursday.
So does that mean that we have to send it by Friday morning?
Friday evening, I thought.
You could send it Monday morning.
Okay.
Oh.
Rabbi?
Here's the issue. If we're going to ask them not to vote for it, we have to know, we can't do that ahead of their revisions. So it depends whether we want to say sort of provisionally, I guess, don't vote for this unless X, Y, or Z. But I don't want them to be able to say, well, we took that into account, you know, and actually not have done that. So I'm not sure. I mean, I think that coming out with a statement once we know, like we could have basically have it ready, right? And then after Monday and we know what information does or doesn't change, we can release it Tuesday and then have time for people to contact council or do whatever. But I think we have to know what they say the final product is.
I was thinking that we would just say that we're disappointed in the content of the document as it is. We don't have to ask them to vote for it or vote against it. We're simply criticizing the document.
Okay, so my thoughts on this, I appreciate those perspectives, but we had over 100 pages in the our reform plan, right? And mostly none of that got into the document, or whatever got into the document was really stripped out, no timelines, no nothing. So I don't have much faith that anything that whatever they're putting in there in their revisions are really going to include us. So I wonder if we are going to, have this letter, I think we just need to put our asks in there, period. Like, this is what we want to see, because I don't have much faith that whatever their revisions are is going to include anything from us anyway. So I think whatever this letter is that we do, we still have to say, these are our recommendations, period. And bullet point them. And then we can, fine, we can write something of disappointment, but the fact of it is we still need to reiterate our ask in that letter. That's just my thoughts, and I'm done speaking.
Yes, I agree, Dr. McIntyre. Bullet point it, make it as sharp as possible. And you can't do anything with a made up mind, but at least we have made the statement. One of the things that I remember from their revision is that they cannot pepper spray people, or they can pepper spray people between the ages of 14 and 18 when there is something going on. What are the police supposed to do? Stand in front of the person and say, and how old are you? Because if you're under such and such age, we can't pepper. When a crisis or something is going on, they never ask any questions about an age. That's something that is in their proposal that's ridiculous. And there are a few more things that we could highlight, but definitely send out the bullet points.
So a lot of great discussion, I think, that we're going to have to talk about over email, folks, because it's getting late. So thank you so much for all of your feedback on this. I'm looking forward to working on it. So we have the meeting update.
Yes, and I'll just say to the people watching, thank you for the comments that you're posting on Facebook. People are asking about how they can support the PAB in this letter. This letter will be made open to the public, and one thing you need to help is sharing the letter and making sure that people read it. That will be one really concrete, clear thing. And also, thank you to all the people who've been showing up, speaking to City Council, supporting a fully funded PAB. That means so much. Okay, so let me just get back to our slideshow briefly. Okay, so these new RPD policies. So, Chief Harriet Sullivan announced, and with Executive Deputy Chief Andre Anderson, had a press conference announcing new policies that were being rolled out over the last week. To quote Chief Anderson, Executive Deputy Chief Anderson, he said, "This is the example of the police being able to reform the police." So, the police department did not reach out to the Police Accountability Board to get our input on these new policies. These were policies, according to the RPD, were crafted by Wilmer Hale. So these policies are being crafted with Wilmer Hale, with the RPD, but not in public and not with the PAB. I just want to make that very clear to folks. So the RPD is rolling out.
I'm sorry, are the taxpayers paying additional money for this?
No, so as I understand it, Wilmer Hale's still operating under its first $250,000 contract with the city. So this is RPD's new policy rollout schedule. So last week, they rolled out new policies on the duty to intervene and chokeholds and other breathing restrictions. Next week, they're rolling out new mental health and de-escalation policies. Though I will say that the RPD rolled out new mental health trainings last week and then rescinded the order, pulled it offline. And I can discuss the details of that later. But the point is that this rollout's been a little bit interesting. So next week, it's mental health and de-escalation. And then in upcoming weeks, it's use of force and dealing with children. So those are the 6 areas that they're working in. Let's talk about the duty to intervene in chokeholds. So these are just, again, the facts about the new RPD rules is there's no disciplinary policies to enforce these new rules. There's no disciplinary policies that were announced saying, here's the new duty to intervene, and here are the consequences if you violate this rule. There's none of that. The city provided no proof or evidence that these policies will lead to change. They simply announced the rules. They didn't say, here's the evidence from other cities where these policies are, where this changed police behavior. Here are the researchers or research materials that we worked on. Similar to the way that, Wilmer Hale did not, present any kind of evidence for the policies and recommendations it made during the draft reform plan process. There hasn't been any evidence or policies presented with these. There may be in the future, but not right now. And they were created with Wilmer Hale in a process not open to the public. So those are some big things to remember before we go into all this. So let's talk about the duty to intervene. So this duty to intervene policy says that officers must stop another officer from breaking the law or RPD policy, but only when it's, quote, safe and feasible for them to do so. And the policy doesn't define what safe and feasible means. Now, if you're a police officer, I assume you look at this order and I would be confused about what this means, right? What does safe and feasible mean? Is it what I think is safe and feasible? Is it what someone else thinks is safe and feasible? It's just not clear. So that's only half the policy, though. The other part of the policy is not intervening may result in discipline. So it's not clear that if you don't intervene, you will be disciplined. You just could be disciplined. But it's even more contingent than that. You only may result in discipline when the other officer was using unreasonable force. Why is that important? Because the duty to intervene is anytime you break the law or any RPD policy. But you're only going to face discipline if the problem was someone using unreasonable force, right? So if you're not going to face discipline for any other kind of breaking policy, it's not clear why this would change officer behavior. Okay, so that's the duty to intervene. And then there's this new breathing restriction policy. People are calling this a chokehold or a stranglehold ban, but it's not that. It's actually broader than that. The policy says that officers cannot use techniques that, quote, impede normal breathing and blood circulation. That's strangleholds, that's chokeholds, that's lots of other things, right? It's saying we're banning the function, not the form. Anything that does this, we say that officers can't do it. But there's an exception. What's the exception? Except when deadly physical force is authorized. So when an officer is justified in using deadly physical force, you can do all these things. So it's not a ban, it's a restriction. So what does it mean to have physical force authorized? You have to go to a different rule, a pre-existing rule. It's about when officers can use general deadly force. Get ready to get confused. Okay, so officers can use deadly force when three things exist, according to RPD's policies. Three things have to exist. First, the officer has to, quote, reasonably believe that a person will use deadly force. Second, the officer has to reasonably believe that deadly force is necessary to defend themselves or someone else from that person, right? But that's not enough. You also have to have, quote, this is the following, I want to quote it. Evidence or information which appears reliable, discloses fact, circumstance. That's a direct quote from the policy. Discloses fact, circumstance. Right, so just, this is the written policy for the RPD. Evidence or information which appears reliable, discloses fact, circumstance, which are collectively of such weight and persuasiveness as to convince a member of what? I don't know, but a member of ordinary intelligence, training, and judgment experience that the first two things exist, right? Okay, I'm sure very few people watching this understand what this is. In lawyer mind, what this means is that the officer actually has to know that the person actually has to think, literally has to think in their brain that the person is going to be using deadly force and that you have to defend using deadly force. And an objective officer in the same situation would also believe the same thing. It's called a subjective and an objective rule. You don't have to understand anything I'm saying. The point is, you have to be a lawyer to understand what this means, because none of this is defined in the policy. The whole understanding of when officers can reasonably believe something happens, it's defined by courts in case law, right? So for anyone to understand the breathing restriction policy, you have to understand this, when deadly force is authorized. And to understand that, you have to have an extremely fine-grained understanding of the law, of policy, and of practice. You have to understand all those things, which gets us to our very important next point.
Can I ask a question real quick on that
Yes.
last point? Because yeah, I'm confused. So the last bullet said something about evidence. So, and I thought it said something about experts in there. Hold on. So is this last bullet basically saying something like, you know, when it's being said that the person had excited delirium?
No.
Okay, because I'm just like, just reading this, I'm wondering if this is out.
Right.
You know, an outside person with this judgment, or yeah, that was just, you know, I wasn't sure where that was going. So
again, part of the problem is that it's grammatically like you can't understand what the phrase means because there's words in there that shouldn't be in there, right? Like this policy doesn't mean anything because it's grammatically incorrect. But the more important thing is that this is the RPD trying to follow constitutional laws about how officers behave. And what constitutional law that's supposed to protect us from, officer misconduct says is that it's not enough for an officer to think, you know what, I think this person's dangerous and I have to use a chokehold on them. The law says officers can't just think it. So an objective person, an ordinary person standing in their shoes would also have to think this person's dangerous and I got to use a chokehold, right? The point of that rule is because police officers historically have just said, whenever they use deadly force, they say, I had to. The guy was dangerous and I thought he was dangerous. So courts in the 1960s said, it's not enough for you to say it was dangerous. We have to imagine some reasonable person who, if they were in your situation, would do the same thing.
Connor,
Yes, go ahead, Bob.
you keep saying person, but in that paragraph, it says member.
Yeah, that's what I was going to also ask as well.
Right. So so it's the reasonable police officer. When we say
Yeah, yeah,
person in their circumstance, it's someone wearing the uniform.
And that's a different level of reasonableness.
Yes.
I'm not sure if it's higher or lower, but it's different.
Thank you for pointing that out, Bob, because that's very important.
Yeah. Board Member Tucker, did you have something to add?
Yes, I did. I was gonna say member, meaning is it like member of force?
Policy,
Is that like a direct Oh, one more question. Hold on. Is that a direct copy and paste from what's there?
Yes.
Hmm.
So the use of the phrase member, the weird, discloses fact, circumstance, which I just copy and pasted it, right?
Oh, okay. So it honestly doesn't make sense to
It-
where
yeah, right.
it came from.
Right. It
Okay.
doesn't make sense in the source.
Okay.
So I guess my question, okay, maybe my memory is not correct, but chokeholds were banned in 2020. So I'm just, maybe I need to go back to that New York State policy or New York State law, but this was already banned in June, I believe, of 2020. So are they using the same language or, so I guess I need to go back and re-educate myself, because if this was already banned in New York State in 2020, why is this exclusion there, or this extra, what if, or this exclude this other language? Like, I'm done speaking.
So I will say two things on that. First, the policy itself discusses the state law that, and I want to say the state law bans chokeholds by making it a crime for a police officer to use these chokeholds in specific situations. The officer has to have intent. They have to intend to do things for the law to be used against them. So my point is that the criminal law, there's loopholes, there's catches. To prosecute an officer, you have to have a beyond reasonable doubt that they did it wrong. And so it does make some sense for police departments to add a ban on these practices that you don't have to, prosecute someone criminally for. So it does make some sense. But Dr. McIntosh, it's very important to understand exactly how the state law impacts this policy, and the RPD has not said. It is not clear from reading the policy what the connection is. So that's a very open and important question. What I will say, though, is that the RPD did answer this question. If you already ban at the state level, what's going on here? And here's the RPD's justification as they gave it to Will Cleveland, a reporter for the Democrat and Chronicle. Update from RPD. There is a statewide ban on them. Department spokesman said officers have never been trained to do chokeholds. The new policy states officers don't use them. Spokesman said the policy is, quote, really semantics. So that's how the RPD is describing their new policy, as semantics.
So I guess I'm confused though, Connor, because from what you're saying in the new general order, it says any way to restrict blood flow and breathing. So that means that a chokehold, as it's commonly taught, wouldn't even matter here. Would be any like if you're wrestling somebody to the ground, you cannot do any type of physical, anything physical to the person on the ground that will restrict any type of breathing or restrict blood flow. That seems, and I'm when we talk about being confused, that seems to me that would be more broad than just saying the word chokehold, especially when I saw from the Twitter person underneath, Will Cleveland from the DNC saying we're not even taught about chokeholds, but we also are, to what you're saying as well, that we're saying, well, then we're not banning chokeholds, but me wrestling somebody to the ground and, not, restricting blood flow. But as long as it's okay that I justify that in a way that it's that another fellow officers can say, of course, sure, I totally understand that. So it's like I see a point and then I'm going to go all the way around it and just leave it kind of just like.
Right.
Vague policies, vague, confusing.
Yes.
So
Oh my
Status quo.
this brings us to a very important point, which is that it all depends on the training. More than just that, it depends on culture too, obviously, but it depends on training, because training can help develop culture, right? So if it's confusing to all of you, we need to see how the department makes it not confusing to officers. And so that's why we asked Chief Harriet Sullivan to let us attend the training sessions. And Chief Harriet Sullivan has said she will make that happen. So we have a commitment from the RPD that PAB will be allowed to watch these officers be trained in these new policies.
I'd also argue that it depends on discipline, because if no one ever gets disciplined for doing this,
I wonder if this is not another example of a lure, L-U-R-E. The police department has thrown, it's like fishing. They've thrown this lure out into the water and they're reeling it in, and we're following behind it. And we're forgetting that there's other stuff that's in that same category. If we wanted to evaluate a police policy, I'm not sure that we would start off by participating in their training. In other words, I think it's, I know I keep saying this, but I think it's a distraction.
What I will say is that the city charter requires that we be trained in RPD policies, practices, and training, I believe. And so and I think you're right, that we have to think about priorities, but to the extent that this fulfills one of our charter obligations, showing up to an RPD training.
But you've already said it's the wrong training.
Well, we have to figure out if that's the case.
On the face of it, it's the wrong training.
All right. Okay. So we're all gonna go down a rabbit hole here. We could talk about this all night. So we are we have a lot of things to discuss. So I want to kind of prioritize. We have the meeting that we just had. We have the budget review, and we have to still go into executive session to discuss some hiring things. So that's going to take us past 8 o'clock. So I wanted to talk about, we can talk about this meeting through email, and, because that's pretty exciting, but not urgent. I do believe we should talk about the budget review, since, we're talking about it in open meeting, and then we can move into executive session. If there are any objections, please, let us hear it.
So I move that we table this discussion.
Well, that sounds good. Arlene seconds that, I assume. All right. So meeting is tabled, or the discussion is tabled. All right. So Connor, can you go ahead and move on to the budget review, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So on Tuesday, Chair Wilson and I attended a meeting with city representatives from City Hall, that's Mayor Warren's administration, and then from City Council to discuss the Police Accountability Board's budget. The current way that this works is, the city proposes a budget to City Council, and then City Council would vote on the budget. And this would all happen in around May, June-ish, right? So right now, the city is coming up with its proposal. The way the city comes up with proposals is it says, each department in city government, we're going to give you an initial number. And you have to figure out how to make your operations work within that number. For the present purposes, the city is treating the Police Accountability Board as a subunit of the City Council. So we do not get a direct number from the city for a proposed budget from the city. Instead, City Council has set a number. City Council informed us back in February that we would have to have our budget cut. That was what City Council had decided, that we would not be receiving increases. Here is your decrease, figure out how to work within them. We had conversations with City Council explaining that, we have to have more money, we can't do this. I'm going to skip all over that. I've kind of detailed this in private emails to the board. The important thing is that, at this Tuesday meeting, it became apparent that City Council was proposing increasing parts of its budget. They're requesting an additional $150,000 for a new lawyer for them. And they had not offered us an opportunity, at least as I understand it, to also request that our budget be increased. But those things are minor. The end result of this meeting was City Hall's budget director asking us for a budget proposal. And a fully funded budget proposal, one that can allow us to do all the things. The city budget leader also asked us to send that proposal to city council. This is a decent thing because that's what the city charter says we have to do. The city charter says we have to submit a budget proposal with financial documentation to the city and to city council. So now that it seems like people are on the same page about what we need to do, the next step is doing that thing, making the budget proposal happen. And I'd love to just have a discussion about how folks best think that to have happen. I think, I crafted a budget proposal last year that's, 70 or 80 pages or something. That's pretty detailed. We can update that budget proposal as necessary. And, obviously make it easier to understand, have a PowerPoint, presentations, these kind of things. I will say that I have spoken to some city council members who are very interested in finding out the details of our budget proposal. One council member asked for it very straightforward. I want to know, if I spend X amount of money, what can I get from the PAB? Tell me something that you can do and tell me what it costs. So give me a menu. And city council can determine what PAB it wants to buy. And I think that's a fairly straightforward idea. And making clear, here's what it costs for us to investigate complaints in a year, in 6 months, in 90 days, that kind of thing. So I just suppose the question is, we do want to get this out relatively quickly, these budget proposals. And I just want to know if folks have any thoughts about maybe how to do it, where to go next. I know Rabbi Settle had some thoughts, but if anyone else did, Chair Wilson.
So Connor, can I just ask about deadline? Can we just start there first, please?
Right. Well, there is no hard deadline on all this, in part because the city's never worked with the Police Accountability Board before. The deadlines that we've been given throughout the prior budget proposal, in the last few months, it's not really clear that they've come from anywhere. So the real deadline here is that the city will be proposing a budget to city council sometime in May or June. And then around June, city council will vote to either approve or revise that budget. Now, the earlier that we can get information to the public, city council, the city hall, the better. There are lots of people who've been asking, how much money does the Police Accountability Board need to be fully funded? And so the quicker we can get that information out, the better.
Yeah, so I think our deadline is probably April then. I think we should try to get it in by April so that we meet the deadline. That's what I would think.
I don't understand.
Go ahead.
Clarify one thing for me. My understanding is that city council has sat with you and given you a budget that represents a reduction from last year's budget. The city administration has come to you and asked for a budget. Aren't those two in conflict?
I suppose. I guess the difference is that all of this process is to help the city hall, city administration come up with a budget proposal.
I understand, but are we? I don't mind being in conflict with city council. I just want to know that I'm in conflict with city council.
Yeah.
City council wants a budget that's, let's just say offhand is $400,000. And we're going to give the administration a budget that's, let's just say 1,200,000, right? We're going to give two different budgets.
Well, I think part of this process is that City Hall wants us to send our budget to City Council. And I will also clarify that when I talk about City Council, I'm not saying the 9 members of City Council have cut our budget. That's very different. So as I understand it, this may be, I think the only people that know might be, Councilmember Evans, who does the financial stuff, President Scott, and maybe Councilmember Gruber, who may have been involved in setting our actual budget. I've spoken to other council members who didn't know that our budget was being reduced. And when we told them, the response was, we want to know what you actually need to do your work. So I'm not sure that there's actually a clear, I think there's conflict within city council about this too.
So we asked about deadline. We asked April, was what Dr. McIntosh suggests. And, about getting this actual budget out there, I know that there's still, we'll still, Bob had some thought, or Dr. Harrison had some thoughts on that as well. So anybody else want to weigh in? Anyone? No? Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead, Jura.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So first of all, I'm not sure kind of what you meant by I had some thoughts about this, but I guess my question is, it seems probably like we should all go back and review it, but that what the budget proposal that you already worked on would be a starting place. I'm confused about the extent. So I think also that we need a discussion about priorities. So in other words, if we don't anticipate actually having disciplinary power returned within the next year, then that gives us a different set of priorities for funding than if we think it's going to come back in 3 months, right? So we need to me, that's the biggest issue. But also the thing I'm somewhat confused about, to be honest, is that the charter says that, within a certain amount of time, and once we're up and running with our, policies or whatever, that complaints should come to us. So at what point do we take over the process that the Center for Conflict Resolution is now doing? Because it seems that we can still initiate a process that does the same thing they do in terms of making recommendations, even if we don't have the actual disciplinary power. So whether we anticipate that within this budget as well.
Great questions. I have a couple answers to them. First, it is entirely up to us when the Civilian Review Board stops functioning. When we decide to adopt rules and procedures, in 60 days, they're gone. It's up to us. Part of the reason I think we haven't is because, for the reasons that you were suggesting earlier, Rabbi Settle, is that we don't want to open our doors if we don't have disciplinary powers in some sense. Now, we could decide we do want to open our doors. We can invest. We could, maybe launch, investigations. But if they have anything to do with discipline, or officers see them as having to do with discipline, we're going to get stymied, right? And we don't want to. We want to obey the law, and the current law says we can't do disciplinary investigations. So as long as that law is around, and so that brings, to your point, Rabbi Settle, how do you budget in the context of deep uncertainty? But we do have some answers to that, because you can redirect resources and this kind of thing. And we have so much else we can do, et cetera. And here's the most important thing. Let's say that we get disciplinary powers back tomorrow, which could happen. The court is announcing decisions tomorrow at 3 p.m. If we do get disciplinary back, we have to hire investigators, train those investigators, inform the public about the complaint process. That process will take months. And so we have to build in the idea of, what are the odds we get disciplinary powers back? And if we think they're high, we should probably hire the people out before, we have to open the doors. So things to think about.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know you said we had kind of like this three different categories of how you would do the budget, but I assume that we should do one with, in the event that we don't get disciplinary back, have one separate budget for that as well. So I don't know if that includes, what you've already done or what, but I'm just thinking that we should have a backup one for that as well.
Yeah.
I also think that we have the time on our hands to do so, especially if we make our deadline, April, and we start off with the budget that you proposed to us, that you gave to us I was gonna say last year. Was it last year? It was last year.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, that you gave to us last year. So if we use that as a starting point, and if I'm not mistaken, because I looked at that, it was really long. But your proposed budget, it was if we had disciplinary powers. So it was in the event that we had disciplinary powers. So that gives us a starting point. Now we just need to kind of work off that and then create something as if we did not get disciplinary powers back.
Right. Right.
But my question was,
Couldn't we,
when would we work on that?
Yeah, good question.
couldn't we treat the disciplinary issue as a supplement to the budget? So there could be a budget for what we do now.
Mhm.
And if we get the disciplinary powers, we're going to need investigators, yada, yada, yada. There's a number of things we're going to need to add to that. That's a supplement.
So, Dr. Harrison, is that what Danielle was, or board member Danielle was saying?
Yeah, but I thought I said it better.
Well, you didn't. She said it better. Don't be taking away her thunder.
Okay, Dr. Harrison.
Making it sound so cute. Yes. All right. So I guess one of my questions is that if we need to, can we get a committee to work on the budget, or do you want to work on like who's available? I know we have people available during the day that can do that. Dr. Harrison, you being one of those. And we also have some other folks, but I was wondering who is available to devote some time to this in the next month.
I think we should take that offline and then sort that out, because we still have to get the rules up and going. We still have to work on the education and a few other things. So that's definitely gonna be another committee.
Well, thanks,
So-
Dr. McIntosh. That's definitely a bigger conversation. So, all right. So then if anybody has anything else, I'm going to ask if we can move on to the next item on our list.
Bob, is your hand up for talking on this?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, just checking.
Okay. All right. And I think we are going to, so now we have to talk about some hiring and
For the candidates.
for the candidates. And so I am going to ask for somebody to make the motion to move into executive session. That's what we're going to discuss.
I motion that we move into executive session.
Second, please.
To talk about some hiring processes, I second that.
Thank you. All right, all in favor, move into executive session? Okay,
Great. So for people watching, just to make clear, we're going into a closed meeting because we're going to be talking about personal details about people we're thinking of hiring or retaining. And for their confidentiality, the law allows us to kind of keep that thing private because, someone doesn't get hired, we don't want to embarrass anyone. So this is a good reason to keep this meeting closed. We won't be coming back after this. We'll briefly coming back just to, vote and end the meeting. So for all functional reasons, the meeting is over. So no need to continue to wait for us to come back. Okay. All right. Now we're going to be going off the live stream in 3, 2,